All right, it's time to have a little bit of fun. We're going to spend our last few weeks learning about human anatomy and a little bit of physiology. Anatomy is just the memorization, basically, of the organs and organ systems in the body. And physiology is like how they work. And physiology is actually super deep. We're just going to graze the surface, but this is going to culminate with a dissection. And so the organs that I'm highlighting today are the ones that you will need to be, for the most part, finding in your dissection. And so this is the beginning of a 3-week or 2.5-week kind of journey through the human body and learning all of the parts. So today's important so that you can get just the foundational, like what is each part, where is it located, and what does it do? That's what'll be on your lab practical. After we finish dissecting, we're going to do a lab practical, which is like a test where you have to identify the parts of our dissection specimen. And when you do that, you'll also be asked what organ system that organ belongs to and what it does. And so this is where you're going to get this information. We are going to spend, excuse me, we are going to spend just time on these the 6 organ systems on the black side of this slide: digestive, respiratory, nervous, reproductive, cardiovascular, and excretory. Those are the ones that we're going to highlight. There are also endocrine, integumentary, immune, muscular, and skeletal. Some of those you're familiar with. I can't talk today. Some of those you are familiar with, and some of those maybe not so much. But this is not an exhaustive list, so it's not all of them that we have, obviously, but and we're certainly not going to be able to spend enough time to learn all the body systems. If this interests you, then you might want to keep looking into human anatomy. So we're going to start with the digestive system. All you're doing here is basically writing down organs and what it does. Okay, so what the digestive system does is breaks down food into nutrients, and we know that we use those nutrients to build proteins and the building blocks of other things in our body that we need to synthesize. We have to have those nutrients. And so our organs are mouth. We start with the mouth, and obviously that's where everything goes in, so that you're chewing your food. So it physically breaks down the large food, and then your esophagus carries food to your stomach. Your esophagus is super muscular and it squeezes. It has this peristalsis action where it's like squeeze, 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 squeeze. So it goes down, which means you could actually stand on your head and drink water. The water would still go to your stomach, even though it feels like, of course you have to get it to swallow it. Otherwise it's going to come out your nose if you don't get it swallowed. But once you get it swallowed, it'll go down your esophagus or up your esophagus if you're standing on your head. Astronauts in no gravity can still swallow food. The food will still go to their stomach. That's because it's muscular. The esophagus. So the esophagus is going to be a tube whenever you're dissecting. It's the tube that's like, you can feel this trachea, this hard one in the front. It's actually behind that. So we can't quite feel our esophagus. The stomach then, of course, is this J-shaped organ. That right here is the J-shaped organ. And it is a sac. And in we're dissecting a fetal pig, so it doesn't have any food in the stomach because it hasn't eaten any food yet. But you'll be able to see it's a sac. You can tell it's also muscular, and it has some really interesting inside walls. Its job is to, it contains the bile that allows food to break down even further than when you chewed it. So that's going to turn into a sludge. You're familiar with the sludge if you've ever thrown up. It's pretty horrible, isn't it? And it's got acids in it and it burns. And oh man, throwing up is disgusting. So I have liver here with an asterisk by it. Your liver is actually largest internal organ, your skin being your largest organ at all. Your liver encompasses all the way across, like ribs to ribs. It's larger on the stomach, on the not stomach side. And then it's smaller kind of on the other side, like over the stomach, but you do have to lift up the liver to find the stomach whenever you're dissecting. So you'll actually physically lift the liver, and underneath it is the stomach. It's large, and it's multiple lobes. What it does is produces bile for the stomach. That's what it does in the digestive system. The liver actually functions in several different systems. It detoxes and cleans out your blood as well. But it does produce bile, so it makes that strong acid that breaks down stuff. And then a gallbladder, it's actually a little bit difficult to find. You can see they've pictured it here, but actually the liver covers it completely. You have to look under the liver for the gallbladder. It's a tiny green sac. And what it does is it stores the bile, and it allows it to become more and more concentrated before it moves to the stomach. So you can live without your gallbladder but it makes it where it's a little bit difficult to break down like heavy foods. Things that require maybe a stronger stomach acid might make you feel a little bit bad if you don't have a gallbladder. And then we have our small intestines, which is about 3 meters long. So meters thick, you know how big they are in my classroom. If you stack 3 of them on top of each other, then that's about how long it is. So it's actually the longest intestine, but it is small in diameter, like 2.5 centimeters, about, yay big in diameter. And most of our food absorption, our nutrient absorption, occurs in the small intestine. So when you pick up the small intestines, you're going to see all of this vascular, like little tiny veins that attach to the small intestines. Those are there to carry away the nutrients so that you can get them into your body. That's your blood supply that carries that off. And it's really, 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 really folded. You'll see that whenever you look at the small intestines, that increases the surface area available for absorption of those nutrients. So it's really big. You cannot miss it. And then your large intestine is followed by that. Your small intestine is followed by your large intestine. It's about 1.5 meters long. So it's considerably shorter, but it's considerably bigger around. And it basically just kind of makes a little square around the outside of the small intestines. So the small intestines will be in the middle and the large intestines go on the outside. It's major. It does absorb some vitamins that you have, but then also its major job is to reabsorb water. So whatever's left over. So your nutrients have been picked up by the small intestines, and then by the blood vessels that are surrounding the small intestines, your large intestines will go ahead and pull out that water, which is super helpful because otherwise you'd have some really runny diarrhea your whole life, and that's kind of gross. And I don't think I have rectum on here. No, I don't. But you need to add rectum to your list. So your rectum is at the end of your large intestines. You'll be able to identify it in the pig because it's attached firmly to the back wall of the pig. It is not like the intestines where you can move it around. It's like stuck. And the rectum is also for reabsorption of water, but it's a holding tank for fecal matter, which I always say we need Rectum Appreciation Day, because if we didn't have a rectum, we would end up just like poop would just drop out of us wherever we went, like rabbits, and that would make for a really smelly classroom. So kind of nice that we have a rectum to store our solid waste until we have a place to deposit it in a safe and clean manner, because solid waste can also create some major infections because it grows a lot of bacteria. But anyway, those are your digestive system. Okay. Moving right along, I'm assuming you're pausing this as needed because I know I'm going really quickly. I'm trying to not make it last an hour long. So your respiratory system, this is to get gas exchange. So in and out, right? And we know that most of what we just breathed in and out is nitrogen, unusable. But what we are looking for in our respirations is oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. We know we need oxygen to run our cell respiration, so we can produce ATP, and we got to get rid of the carbon dioxide waste product that we have created. And so that's what organs, I just read that. That's what respiratory system does. Very simple system. You typically are supposed to breathe in through your nose instead of your mouth, though sometimes in Oklahoma, there's no breathing in through your nose. You have little hairs in your nose that clean the air as it comes in, creates little boogers, but I mean, boogers are because you have dirt in the air and stuck in your nose, better than it being in your lungs. And then, of course, then also you can release gases that way out your mouth or nose. But that's all I'm going to say about that. I have a whole bunch more little fun facts, but I'm going to try to keep it easy for you today. So your trachea is a hard tube. Everyone, feel your front of your throat right there. You can feel there's rings, ridges right through your throat. Those are cartilaginous rings, they're called, and they're just little rings that stack like that. And what they do is they hold your trachea open. Your trachea should be open all the time because we don't want it collapsing, because when your trachea collapses, you cannot breathe. And so what its job is 100% to let the gases go from your nose to your lungs. That's it. And then your lungs are these big lobes that are spongy feeling. And that was a surprise to me the first time I did a cadaver dissection, which was human dissection. It was how like full our lungs were. I always thought our lungs were like balloons, but they are like spongy tissue. And so you'll be looking at the lungs Basically, they have microscopic little air sacs in there. So they're spongy feeling because it's almost like a sponge has little holes in it. And you can't really, I mean, some of the sponges you can see the holes, but there's holes that are so small that you can't really see them, but it gives it a spongy feel. And that's kind of how your lungs are. And around each of those little air sacs, there's just blood vessels around it. And so tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of little air sacs. Okay. So the lungs have branches, and then they branch and they branch and they branch and they go to all these little bitty air sacs at the end where you have gas exchange. Okay. So that is your respiratory system, finishing off with the muscle. So you have a diaphragm. Your diaphragm, actually, I know you probably can't see this below the camera, but your diaphragm actually is in between your lungs and your liver. So your liver's right below, and your lungs are up above. Our pig does not have a very muscular diaphragm because it hasn't actually ever breathed before. So it looks more like a membrane. If you were looking at a fully grown organism, you would be like a muscle. You'd like see the pink. So what it does actually is it just causes kind of a vacuum effect where the diaphragm, so if your lungs are sitting on top of it, the diaphragm actually contracts and it pulls down on your lungs. And when it does that, like pulls down on them, and it makes air just come in, like air has to come in because you've pulled down on your lungs, creating like a volume, kind of like a little vacuum, but where it's like sucking it in. Okay. And then it just relaxes and lets go. So you don't push out your air, you just let go and your lungs go back to their state, and they do that. Now you can push with the muscles that are in between your ribs. Those push your lungs, but the diaphragm's job is to contract, and it pulls down in your lungs. So this is why your diaphragm runs all the time. Your diaphragm is run by your brainstem. And so even when you're sleeping, your diaphragm is like contract, let go, contract, let go, so that you breathe. Okay. All right. Excretory urinary system. This is a pretty cool portion. Your kidneys are actually found in your back, which is kind of a weird thought, right above your hip bones on your back, but two fists right above your hip bones. That's where your kidneys are. So whenever we're dissecting our pig, you have to move everything out of the way to find them. Okay. So what their job is to filter out the wastes. And so this is a very complex system. Basically, your kidneys have, it deals a lot with osmosis, with the water balance. It deals a lot with diffusion of solutes and things like that. Their job is to get the waste out so that you can urinate it out. You can get rid of it. Now, this is not digestive waste. This is blood wastes. Okay. So digestive waste is going to be what goes through, like your mouth, esophagus, and stomach, small intestine, large intestine. What's left over is your digestive waste, something you've eaten, right? So then after all of that is said and done, and it's picked up by the blood and carried on your body, and you've got metabolic products like different processes in the cells are releasing wastes, that gets picked up by your blood and carried out away from cells. So the cells' wastes are, carried away in the blood, and then they go to your kidneys. So this isn't digestion. So your kidneys have nothing to do with your digestive system. They're filtering blood. Okay. And then once they've got that waste filtered, it's just these tiny little tubes here. They're called ureters. They carry it down to your bladder, which is an amazing little muscular sac. It has stretch receptors in it, so that when it stretches to a certain point, you get a nerve response to your brain that says you need to pee. Some people have more sensitive stretch receptors and others don't have to pee all the time. Some people have smaller bladders and others don't have to pee all the time. And then your urethra is carried out. It carries the urine out of your body. Okay. I think that's it. Pretty simple. Okay. Nervous system is anything but simple. We aren't going to see a whole lot of the nervous system in the pig. We will dissect. Usually I dissect out one or two of the brains of the pigs. It's a pretty difficult dissection because the brain tissue is super soft. And so it's easily destroyed, and their skull is super thin because they're babies. So basically the brain creates and interprets signals. So, it's just nervous response. It's an electrical impulse response. In AP Bio, we learn a lot more about how nerves work. But basically, it's just sending a message. So your brain gets a message from your maybe eyes, or from your ears, or from your mouth, or from your muscles, or from touch, or whatever. And it gets that and it interprets it into oh my gosh, that is chocolate chip cookies. I love those. I'm going to walk to the kitchen. And so then what happens then is your spinal cord, which, goes down your back there in the middle of all your vertebrae, it carries the message, and then you start to walk. Okay. And then your nerves then are all of the things that radiate from your spinal cord, all these little we might be able to see some nerves. They're really hard to see because they're super thin. Even in bundles, they're super thin. But they're like a white stringy looking thing once you get enough of them together that you can see them because they're so thin, they're like microscopic. But basically, you can see them in your spinal cord, but the spinal cord dissection we don't typically do because it's a really hard dissection. But what you will see if you do see it is that coming out of your spinal cord is just tons of nerves, and they go all parts of the body, so that you can get signals in from the outside world and you can send signals back. Your spinal cord can send signals back to create a response to that, whatever is in the outside world. Okay. Cardiovascular, blood. So there's no blood in the pig. It is all dye. It's just like a kind of almost like a stretchy dye, like it's really thick. So it doesn't run anywhere. Like there's no liquid running around. But basically it's the function of the cardiovascular system. So this is your blood supply, is to transport blood with the gas and the nutrients, remember, that we've picked up and got into our body, and it sends it throughout the body. And it actually goes like everywhere. Every cell has to come into contact somehow with this supply of life, sustaining items. So first of all, your heart, we're going to look into how the heart works a little bit. Wish we had more time. But it pumps. It's a super strong muscle, and it pumps constantly. This is another thing that's run by your brainstem. Your brainstem is this little part of your brain that's down here, and it powers everything that's like involuntary, like stuff that you don't control, it controls. So your heart just sits there and pumps and pumps and pumps and pumps and pumps. And it has parts of it that send blood to different places in your body. And we'll get more details on the heart on one of our activities. And then you have vessels, and veins are moving towards the heart, and arteries are moving away. So arteries are away and veins are towards. Now, most of the time, your arteries that send away from the heart are going to have oxygenated blood. So it's going to look red. Okay. There's one exception, and we'll talk about that one when we talk more about the heart. And then veins, when they're coming back to the heart, typically they're blue because the oxygen combined with the iron in our blood makes it red. Think about our red dirt that we have. That's because we have a lot of iron in our dirt here. And whenever it's exposed to oxygen, it turns red, just like your blood. Now, your blood isn't actually blue, okay? It's just less red. So all the pictures where it's just like straight up blue, your blood is never blue. Like you can see kind of, if your skin is kind of pale like mine, you can see some bluish colored veins. That's just really a depletion of oxygen. It just makes it kind of purple. It's never actually blue. And it looks more blue in your, like when you look at it through your skin than it does actually than the liquid itself does, okay? Or I guess it's not. It is liquid. Plasma is clear. The liquid part is clear, but then the cells themselves are what's red. Okay, well, that was pretty quick. All right, so finally, we're going to talk about the reproductive system. You're going to have to determine if your pig is male or female based on the reproductive organs that the pig has. That's the only way to tell. Otherwise, they're the same size and everything else. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to create and deliver cells for reproduction. You remember that biology and in biology, biological fitness is survival and reproduction. And so this is like half of fitness is reproduction. And so it's super important that we understand the reproduction of organisms. So both these are creating cells, so doing meiosis, so you're creating sperm or egg, and also having a place where the offspring can grow, because we're mammals. And so along with some other things that aren't mammals, there are a few other things that carry the babies inside their body until they hatch from their eggs. So we have to have a place for the offspring to actually develop. Okay, so other things that reproduce might lay an egg, and then they'll just develop inside the egg with all of the extra little nutrients that egg provides. And that's enough nutrients for them to grow inside the egg and hatch. Ours are just essentially, we don't have like an egg, like we have a little egg that's fertilized, but we don't have like a shelled egg. And so ours actually attaches and grows inside the body until it's developed enough to come out. And that's kind of what happens there. So on the male, you have testes, which creates sperm. That is basically where meiosis occurs in males. Okay. And then you have vas deferens. So the testes are down below. And then you have vas deferens that carry, this is a little tube that carries the sperm through the body. And it's not all sperm is released from the body. Some of it is just reabsorbed. Like if the sperm isn't released, then it's just reabsorbed into the body. Males create a lot of sperm, like a lot of sperm. And so most of it is just reabsorbed into the body and never even like had a chance to be used. And then also the interesting thing is for testes is they are outside of the body, which seems really odd because like I just said, like for biology, reproduction is like half of the fitness argument. And so then the question is kind of like, why would our kind of main reproductive organs be outside the body? It seems like so strange that it wouldn't be more protected. Like all our other organs are like inside of ribs or behind muscles or, super protected. And then the testes, which is really is responsible for continuing the species, is outside the body. It seems so odd. Well, strangely, evolutionarily speaking, I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but sperm develop at a slightly cooler temperature. Optimal sperm development is a slightly cooler temperature than body temperature. And so if you had sperm carried at 98.6 degrees, it wouldn't develop as well. They would still develop, just not as well. And so optimal developmental temperature for sperm is lower. And so the testes are outside the body. Now they do have a scrotal sac around it. And so you can kind of see that in the picture. But it has musculature in the body, right close to the body. And so the scrotal sac can actually pull closer to the body if it's cold. And why is it doing that? So that the sperm can develop. Like it's actually kind of thermostatically, oddly enough, keeping the right temperature. So the scrotum, testes inside the scrotum can be pulled up closer to the body to keep the sperm warm so that they'll develop. Or if it's too hot, it'll drop them away. And so that then they will cool off and the sperm will be optimal development. So that's kind of a cool feature. Speaking of homeostasis, as far as that goes, is regulating temperature. I mean, that's kind of interesting. And so where was I? I forgot to say that when we were talking about testes. So vas deferens carries them through, and then the penis delivers sperm to female. Now, this being said, I forgot to say back in the, I would go back, but that would take forever. Back in the excretory system where you had kidneys and ureters and bladder and urethra, the urethra in males is also the opening for the reproductive system. So in males, we call this a urogenital opening because they have one urethra. So actually, I should have urethra in here as well. So you might want to add that. So urethra is where the sperm actually are leaving the body, and then in the penis. And so the penis actually is full of blood vessels, is what actually makes it be able to become hard enough to deliver sperm to female. And so that's actually not like muscular at all or anything like that. It's just blood flow, like swelling almost, kind of like if you were to injure your finger or something and it would like kind of swell up. And that's because it's got a lot of blood flow to it because the body's trying to send blood there to heal it. This is kind of the same idea, just a little bit different, but that's all that causes the change in the penis. So it's pretty interesting. Female, on the other hand, a lot different. So up until this point, all of our organ systems are like identical. Like you couldn't tell male from female in any of the other organ systems until you get to reproductive. So, but we have to kind of talk about the difference here. So in females, and honestly, I'll probably spend a little more time on reproduction just because there's so much that goes on with regulation of it. If we have time, hopefully we will. So you have your ovaries here, and there's 2 of them. And they create eggs. These are super small. Like you aren't probably going to be able to see these in the pig, maybe. And actually, in in our pigs, the testes are still up inside the body. They haven't descended down for the pigs yet. And so basically, the ovaries and the testes look exactly alike. And so it's really hard to tell internally which is male and female. So same idea. And you can kind of see a body plan here, 2 testes, 2 ovaries, same shape, same size. They start out kind of in the same place, and then the males descend down outside the body. But you have 1 ovary on each side of the female's body, but they're super, super close together. Like, I mean, it's not like one's way on the right and one on the left. Like they're close. And so It's kind of interesting. The ovaries release one egg per month, so they take turns. It'll be left ovary, release an egg, right ovary, release an egg, back and forth. Okay, and then they'll do that cycled based on hormones, and so the body releases hormones, and then the egg is told to continue development through meiosis, and you get the one egg, and then it moves down the fallopian tubes. Takes it a couple of days to move down the fallopian tube. This point right here in the fallopian tube is where, if there are sperm present, it will be fertilized. Okay, so it's not fertilized like in the ovary, and it's not fertilized after it gets down to the uterus. It is fertilized in the fallopian tube. If it's not fertilized in the fallopian tube, it won't be fertilized at all. And so it has like kind of a 3-day window there for fertilization. Okay, and then the uterus is where the offspring will actually begin to develop if there is a fertilized egg. Now, most eggs are not fertilized, okay? And so most eggs will just be like sloughed out of the body whenever you have whenever a female has her menstrual cycle, okay? So what happens here is, if it's fertilized, it'll implant into this little wall. Now, the body has already built up kind of a lot of blood vessels in the wall, so that the blood vessels, of course, provide oxygen and nutrients for the baby. And so it's already kind of built that up, and it will rest in there and kind of embed in this nice little nutrient-filled wall. But as the baby develops, there will begin to develop an umbilical cord. But until the umbilical cord develops, it's kind of a diffusion thing with all of this blood vasculature. And that means once a month, if the egg is not fertilized, all that blood vascular, all that tissue and stuff that was built up there has to be sloughed out of the body, and then it'll be rebuilt the next month. Okay, and that's where in the uterus is where the baby will develop over a period of, for humans, 9 months approximately. And then it will, and then the baby will come through its head down here in the cervix area. This is the cervix. And if you hear him saying things about, oh, she's dilated to a 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, that's like the diameter of the opening of the cervix. So it gets kind of big, like 10 centimeters. It gets like really big. And then the baby would come out head first down through the vagina. Sometimes they call it the birth canal. And that's also where the sperm would enter if it was going to be fertilized. Okay. Hope that's, sorry. So females have 3 openings, okay? So they have the urine or excretory system opening, which is the urethra. They have vagina, which is the opening of the reproductive system. And they have the anus, which is the opening of the digestive system. We didn't actually talk about that, but it's at the end of the rectum. Males have 2. They have a urogenital opening, just one, just the urethra that serves both the urine or the excretory system and reproductive. And then they have anus. So that's kind of a big difference. Okay, cool. I hope that you've been able to follow all of that. I know it was really fast and actually really long. And you'll need to know that over a period of time. Like, we'll probably do some quizzing on that pretty soon, but maybe not this coming Friday, because that's pretty fast. So we'll talk about it and go over it some, but let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you soon.